Good morning. I want to welcome everyone participating in this morning's webinar. My name is Vanessa Kubik. I am a senior accountant at Gelman, Rosenberg Freedman, and I will be today's moderator. I'd like to start off today with some quick housekeeping items and explain what participants need to do to earn CPE credit for today's webinar. For the best sound quality, we highly recommend you connect by phone instead of your computer. If you have any technical questions or issues during the webinar, please use the chat panel to speak with our webinar administrator for assistance. Please note this webinar will be recorded and made available on our website following the event. The slides will also be posted at this address, www.grfcpa.com/webinars/. Webinar participants seeking CPE credit for this presentation must complete and submit a short evaluation survey that will appear automatically immediately following the webinar. Please write down the CPE words when they are given and save them until you receive your CPE certificate, as they will not be provided again. You will be asked to recall these words in order to receive credit. If you have an active pop-up blocker, please take a moment and disable it now so it will not block the survey. Any technical questions about the survey may be addressed to Dominic Acosta at dacosta@grfcpa.com. As the title of this webinar implies, today's learning objective is to provide attendees with a better understanding of QuickBooks Online control features and control how your organization can leverage them as part of your internal control program. One CPE credit is available to attendees of today's webinar. With all that said, welcome to today's webinar. Implement effective internal controls with built-in QuickBooks Online tools. Ian Schuman is an outsourced accounting and advisory services partner and has worked in public accounting since 1996, providing auditing, accounting, and consulting services to tax-exempt organizations and for-profit businesses at various stages of development. Proficient in several accounting software packages and a certified pro advisor in QuickBooks and QuickBooks Online, he frequently advises clients on best practices for setting up their accounting systems. Kosia Danyang is a supervisor for outsourced accounting and advisory services. He provides accounting services to an extensive number of clients, including nonprofit organizations and government contractors. Kosia has used QuickBooks for more than 10 years and is a certified Sage Intacct specialist and certified Sage Intacct accounting specialist.
All right, thank you so much, Vanessa. I wanted to welcome everybody and just say I appreciate you joining us today for our webinar. I wanted to start today with two things about the software itself. First, today we're going to be talking about QuickBooks Online, not QuickBooks Desktop. These are two different and parallel software platforms, both put out by Intuit, so there's often some confusion. QuickBooks Desktop is a normal program that would be installed and run on your computer or on a server. QuickBooks Online is an internet browser-based software that, of course, runs in the cloud. All of the topics in today's material also exist in the desktop version, but they all work differently, and sometimes the differences can be substantial. During the webinar, we might comment a little more about how a particular feature works in desktop, but I wanted to say here that for some features, I prefer the desktop version, and for others, I would prefer the way they work in online. Second, this probably goes without saying, but I should add that this is not a software sales session. We aren't here to tell you that QuickBooks Online is perfect, and some of these features have significant limitations, and we will be pointing those out. QuickBooks Online is very popular and it's a good solution for a lot of our clients. We often see that people just don't use these basic features that are built in, and that's really the theme for today's webinar. We'd like to remind everyone of these things and show how to use them. So we're going to start with advanced company settings, and then I'll cover the closing date feature. After that, Kosi will talk about the audit trail, and then I'll cover users and permissions, and then Kosi will wrap it up with some other internal control features that we wanted to highlight. So advanced company settings. I like to cover the settings or options in any software, whether it's an accounting software or just a computer game that I'm playing, because you go in the settings and you can see what you can control or change about the software. I think that's something that a lot of people just overlook. So I just wanted to spend a minute and highlight what's there. You get here by clicking on that gear icon on the top right of the screen, and that'll pull up the menu here that you see on the left. There's a list of things you can do under your company, and we'll be going to the first one, which is Account and Settings. When you click Account and Settings, that pulls up the menu you see here on the right with a list of topics on the left, a vertical list, and each one of those has a series of preferences that you can set and turn on or off various features. We'll be looking at the last one, which is advanced. While we're here, I wanted to point out under your company, the second option there is called manage users. So later in the session, when we talk about adding users and permissions for those users, that's where you would click to get to that screen. So once you're inside of the advanced preferences, again, there's a list of various things in sections that you can change. The first one is the accounting preferences. And here you can see there's not really that much here. There's only 4 things. The first 2 are just about setting the fiscal year. The next one is just the accounting method. This works the same way that QuickBooks has always worked, which is that it's really calculated on the fly. You're changing between cash and accrual, and this setting has limited impact other than changing the defaults to the reports, because you can change it at any time. The last one is where you would go to close the books, and that's when we finish with the preferences, we'll cover that in more detail. Scrolling down, the next section is the chart of accounts. So I couldn't do this class without mentioning that yes, in QuickBooks Online, account numbers are optional. They actually default to off if you're setting up a brand new company. So this is where you would go to turn on account numbers. I'm not really going to defend that, except I guess to offer that from the perspective of a 21st century database, the database itself is just as happy looking for a 40-character alphanumeric name than it is account number 8110. So I think that while the software might not think these are essential, probably the majority of the accountants and auditors in the room today probably do. The next section is a series of automation options. And I wanted to highlight these because some of them default to on, and you should be aware of the way these things work. There is, I think, an inherent trade-off between the time savings that they offer and what's really an increased risk of error. So you have to look at these and judge for your company which ones you're comfortable using. For example, the first one, pre-fill forms with previously entered content. What that's going to do is anytime you add a transaction for a vendor or a customer, when you select the vendor or customer name, it will automatically fill in the entire rest of the form with things like the dollar amount and the account number. And that's just something that, for some vendors that might be right every time, but you definitely have to be careful with that and be aware that this is a global setting. It's not vendor specific. So take a minute when you're in the software and just look through these 4 things and see what they do and which ones you're comfortable using. Finally, at the bottom, there's a couple other preferences. In this section, there are mostly some, I guess what I'd call quality of life options, like the date format, number format, just how you want these things to look. But at the bottom of that list, there are a few topics that where you can turn on or off warnings about duplicate numbering. And then at the very bottom, there is the option for how long you want the system to sit idle before it'll just automatically log you out. So these are things you can control. And that is going to bring us back to Vanessa for our first polling question.
Okay, we have come to our first polling question. Does your QuickBooks Online file use a closing date? Yes? No? I do not use QuickBooks Online? Or not sure? Please take a moment now to answer. While participants are recording their answers, I'll provide the first CPE word. The first CPE word is Apple. That's A-P-P-L-E. If you want to receive CPE credit, please jot these words down because you will need them for the survey emailed following the webinar. Again, the first CPE word is Apple. A-P-P-L-E.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. We see here that 44% of you are using the closing date, which is great. We've got some people not using it, and then a third of the audience that doesn't use the software. So I'm happy to see so many people using it. So that's great. All right, so that is our lead in to the closing date. And so what is the closing date? The closing date is the closest thing QuickBooks has to what you would recognize as a normal close process that a traditional accounting software might do. A traditional software usually has the ability to close a period where it's just sealed. You can't change it, you can't edit it, you can't add to it anymore, etc. It's closed. QuickBooks still does not do that. It doesn't get that far. What it does have is something that is maybe a reasonable approximation of that. And what it'll do is lets you tell the system a date, whatever date you want. It can be the end of the month, it can be yesterday, whatever it is. And through that date, you are essentially closed. You're done with the records through that date. It will still let you edit, delete, add, whatever, but you're going to get an error message. And you can control a little bit what that message is. And the message reads like this: double check the transaction date. This transaction was on or before your company's closing date. Using this date will affect your books. Are you sure you want to save? Yes, no. There was a version of this message actually in the desktop version that used to say, QuickBooks lets you do this, but it's not a good idea. And I actually really preferred that version of this message just because it was, what can you say, it's honest and it cut right to the chase. This does the trick though, and it pulls up that message, which should give you pause and make you think about whether you really want to do whatever the transaction is. So this is how you get there. You turn on that close the books feature or option at the bottom of that preferences list under accounting. You would tell it whatever the date is. drop down there to select whether you just want a warning or if you want a password. Using a password would give you the ability to control who has the password and therefore who has the right to change something from a prior period. I actually kind of like having a password, even if it's just me doing it and if the password is password, because if nothing else, then you can't just sort of, automatically by reflex clear the message that pops up, because we all do that. We would typically do this maybe on a monthly basis whenever we do the close. In some cases, maybe on a quarterly basis, or sometimes I have clients that just do this once a year when they're done the records and send it off to do the tax return, then they would close that year. I do want to highlight the last bullet point here, the voiding a check issue. If you're familiar with the void check problem in QuickBooks, the way QuickBooks voids a check is that it goes back to the original check, back on whatever date that check was written, and just zeroes it out. That check might be from last month, last year, 5 years ago, whatever. If you do that in QuickBooks Online and have the closing date set, it will pop up with the message saying, "Are you sure?" But I wanted to highlight it here because this is something that is a significant thing that works differently in QuickBooks Desktop. In the desktop, using the closing date kind of fixes the void check process, but that is not true in QuickBooks Online. In QuickBooks Online, it still just goes back and voids that check if you say yes to the pop-up and let it do that. So be aware of that. And we always just, instead of using void checks, just do a journal entry instead. There is a really nice report called the Exception to Closing Date Report. That's under Reports and under the Accountant Reports. It looks like the image to the right, where the title is Exceptions to, in this case, 12/31/15. So it'll tell you what the current closing date is. And then for any transaction that has what the system calls an exception, which is any action that occurred after the closing date was set, it'll show you the history of that transaction. And you can see in the right, there's some things that happened on November 20th, and those are not highlighted. You can see that beige highlight. The not highlighted ones happened prior to the closing date being set. The highlighted transaction happened after the closing date was set. If you want to see what happened in that action, you can click on that highlighted row and it'll expand, and then you can see what changed. On this screen, I do wish it would tell you when the closing date was set, but it doesn't do that. So that's closing date, and that's going to bring us to the audit trail.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone. As Vanessa pointed out earlier, I've been using QuickBooks for a while, and I really like many of the great features that QuickBooks Online offers. But today, I want to especially talk about the audit history and the audit log. In QuickBooks Desktop, you have the Audit Trail. It's the same feature I'm going to discuss today, but it's just online. In QuickBooks Online, it's called Audit Log. This feature essentially records all the changes that are made to the data in your accounting system. This feature is active all the time and cannot be disabled, but only users with full access are able to view the audit log. So first, I would like to talk about at the transaction level, what you see. So at the transaction level, it's called audit history. And to access that feature, let's say you're looking at a check or a journal entry or invoice, and something look weird and something has changed, and you just want to get to the detail of what exactly has changed. So what you can do is open the transaction. If it's a check, open the check, And if you scroll down to the bottom, you see an option for more. Once you click more, you have the option to select audit history. This works for any transaction, and what you essentially see is all the different versions of that specific transaction. So as you can see on the screen, on December 30th, 2014, Ian Schuman edited this specific transaction. And on September 14, he went back and edited the same transaction again. So if you click on one of those versions of the transaction, you'll see something similar to what you have on the screen. And the change is highlighted. So it shows you the username, the date when the change happened, and what exactly has changed about this transaction. But what I really like in QuickBooks Online is that if you look at the upper right corner, you see compare. If you click on compare, you'll see an option to select show changes only. And if you click on that, you see something similar to what you have on the screen. I like this view, it's quick, and in a snapshot, it gives you exactly what changed. So if we look at this, Ian changed the amount of this transaction from 1550 to 1555. So I really like this part because it just summarizes exactly what has changed. So you don't have to be, looking left and right to see the details. It shows you exactly what changed. So that's the audit history. That's what you see on the transaction level. QuickBooks also offers you a whole report to see all the changes that are made to your data. And that's called audit log. And if you run an audit log report, you'll see something similar to the image we have. And I like the fact that it's a much cleaner report than the desktop. And to access this report, all you have to do is, go to the gear icon and click on Tools and select Audit Log. Once you do that, you'll see the date. In one column, you see the date where the transaction was modified. You see who made that change. You see what exactly has changed. And QuickBooks call those events. So if you see here, you can see deleted bill, added bill, deleted journal entry, and so on and so forth. So that's the audit history. And the audit history also goes beyond just showing you when the transaction was edited, deleted, or changed. But also, the audit log even records when the user logs in and logs out of the system. This option is now available in the desktop. But I want to point out that you only see a user being logged out if that user actually logged out of the software. But if you just, for some reason, you just step away from your computer and the system times out, or you close your web browser, the audit log is now going to record that user has been logged out. The other thing you'll notice in the audit log are these special users. You see users as support representative, system administration, import administration, and so forth and so on. So what I would like to do here, give some example of the type of change that are made by these special users. So let's pick, for instance, system administration. You see changes made by system administration in multiple occasions, and one of them it will be a situation where you have an account that has a balance, and for some reason you deleted that account. If you deleted that account without first manually transferring the balance to a different account, QuickBooks will automatically transfer the balance to opening balance equity. And if you look at the audit log, that change will be recorded as a change made by the system administration. Another example will be when you use third-party application. Nowadays, we have many great third-party applications that you can use, like Build.com and Tally and Expensify. So when those systems send data into QuickBooks Online, the change and the addition that are made to your data are recorded as being made by system administration. Import administration is when you are switching from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, and you had to import all the data in the desktop version to QuickBooks Online. So those additions will be recorded as change made by import administration. The support representative, that's obvious. This is when you're having technical issues with QuickBooks Online and you call the QuickBooks representative and they help you solve that technical issue. During that process, if they made any change to your data, that change will be recorded in the audit log as a change made by a support representative. The audit log has a filter which can help you narrow down your search. But I would like to point out two things that I really like about the feature, this filter. So if you select the option for shows transaction, if you select transaction, you have the option to go, if you can see it on the screen, right below transaction to see show. If you click on the downward arrow on the right side of all transaction, you see an option to select deleted or voided transaction. I like this feature, and I think this is something user can incorporate in their monthly or quarterly closing process, whatever the frequency is, because it will help you just quickly view and review all the deleted and voided transactions. So I will encourage users to do that and make sure you are okay with all the transactions that were deleted or voided. Another one that I will point out is list. So list will be list of names, and a great example will be, if somebody's trying to commit a fraud. Let's say for some reason, Corsi decides to write a check to himself. He writes a check to himself, he cashes the check, and later on, he goes back to the system and change the name to a vendor that you use more frequently to hide the fraud. So if you select list in that filter and you run the report, you'll be able to detect that issue. You'll be able to see that at some point a check was written out to Corsi and then the name was changed later to another vendor, and you can investigate and get to the bottom of that. So I like the filter. I think it's a great internal control feature that people should incorporate in their closing process. As Ian pointed out earlier, QuickBooks Online has great features, but it also presents some significant limitations. And I would just like to take a minute to talk about some of those limitations. So the first one is the setting change. So the audit log has the ability to record everything you change in your setting, but the only problem is that it doesn't give you any detail. So here on October 9, we noticed Ian Schumann changed something in the setting, but we don't know what exactly he has changed. And sorry. And we know that 100 things could have changed in the setting, but QuickBooks just doesn't give you any detail. So that's a limitation we see now, and hopefully they can improve that in the future. Another problem is when you look at the audit log, you see columns. You see different columns. One of the columns is event. An example of event are deleted transaction, added transaction, and so on and so forth. The problem is that you cannot sort the audit log by event. I think it would have been great if you can just sort, and if you're trying to see deleted transaction or if you're trying to see edited transaction, if you can just sort that filter. But QuickBooks Online, as we speak, doesn't give you that option. The third limitation I would like to point out is the inability to filter on transaction date. So in the audit log, you see two kinds of date. You see date when the transaction was changed, and you also see the original date of the transaction. QuickBooks doesn't give you, the audit log doesn't give you the option to filter things by the transaction date. And actually, in the next session, when I will discuss the other internal control feature, I would like to get in a little more detail about this feature and show you a workaround if you still feel like you need, for some reason, to filter things by the transaction date. I will show you a workaround that we have found. So with that said, I will turn it to Vanessa for the polling question number 2.
Thanks, Kosi. So we have now come to our second polling question. How are you using the audit history or audit log features? I have never used them, just to research specific transactions as needed, or as a control in the closing process. Please take a moment now to answer. While participants are recording their answers, I'll provide the second CPE word. The second CPE word is fall, F-A-L-L. If you want to receive CPE credit, please jot these words down because you will need them for the survey emailed following the webinar. Again, the second CPE word is fall, F-A-L-L.
Okay, so here's the results of that. Thanks, Vanessa, for running that. This is a pretty even split between never used them and just specific need when there's something I need to research. And there's very few that use it as an ongoing regular control in the process. All right. So that brings us to users and permissions. The general message here we put right here on the title screen, which is that every person using QuickBooks really should have their own login. If they don't, otherwise, all the audit trail functionality that we just saw is almost rendered useless because all of the actions taken would be logged as the same person. So it's much better information if everybody is logging in with their own username. I think this is something a lot easier in a browser-based software. It just seems like by human nature, when it's on your computer in a browser, you're logging in as you, when in the old version, on a desktop, back in the old days when there was like the accounting computer, this was a lot harder to manage and do. So this is users and permission. So QuickBooks gives you 5 or 3 users, depending on whether your subscription is either the Plus or the Essentials version. In addition to those, you get 2 external accountant users. Those do not count towards the 5 or the 3. There are also report only or time tracking users, and you can have, I think, an infinite number of those, and they also do not count towards the 5 or 3 limit. All of these can be in the software at the same time, simultaneously doing whatever they're doing. So this is where you would go to add a user. You would click on Add User under the Manage Users button that we saw earlier, and that's going to bring up the window on the left, Add a New User. That has 4 options: Custom, Company Admin, Reports Only, or Time Tracking Only. Time tracking is for employees that are entering timesheet level information, and all they would see is their own timesheets. Reports only we'll see in a little more detail a little later in this section, but that is for someone that has really view-only access and only gets the reports. Company admin, there always has to be at least one company admin, but in general, all of the other users would be custom. Sometimes we have a second company admin just as a backup in case something happens to the first company admin, but everybody else would be custom user. And when you select custom user, then you get the screen on the right, which is add a new user, select rights, all, none, limited, and then under limited, you have customers and vendors. So we'll start with limited access customers. What this is really for kind of an accounts receivable role. So that person would have the right to go in and add, delete, or edit customers. They can add invoices, receive payments, all the things you would need to do accounts receivable. Similar with limited and vendors, there the person would have the right to add, delete, edit vendors. They can cut checks, enter bills, all of the things you would need to do AP. You can turn both of those on and have a limited access that have customers and vendors, and that would combine the roles of accounts payable and accounts receivable. But that is different than all access. If you select all access, then you get everything under the limited stuff, but you also get access to sort of top level company-wide financial information like the profit and loss report information, bank reconciliations, journal entries, those sort of things. So I wanted to show this screen. There is a really nice chart that shows what all of those different roles have access to. It's far too long to include here in the seminar content. But if you go into the online help menu, there's a button on the screen for help. If you go there and click on types of users and permissions in QuickBooks Online, then you'll scroll down a little bit, and then you'll see this chart with the columns by type of user. And this is just the very top of that. It goes on for a while, giving you a lot of information about what the different types of users can do. You'll notice on the far right, there's a column for none. So you might wonder, why would you need no access? And the reason for no access is that for any of these users, you also set these administrative rights. And these, what you might do is have somebody with no access to any of the accounting information, but there may be somebody from the IT department, and so they can't see any of the accounting stuff, but they would have the right and the ability to manage the users, to add, delete, edit users, or to manage the subscription for the credit card payment for the software itself. So that's how you might use the no access. Finally, there's report-only users. This is the home screen. If you're a report-only user, you log in, and this is what you would see. It's the report list, which is perfect because that's all they have access to. I really like that part of this, which is that the user comes in here, they don't see the interface to stuff they don't have access to. So instead of getting large sections of the software that are there and then grayed out, and then they can't click on it and they get this discouraging message about not having access to it, they just only see what they can actually do. I kind of like that. There's a long list of the different reports. It's in sections. I'm just showing you here the very top of it, and each section you can expand. So this is the business overview reports that they can get to. They do not have a couple of things. They do not have access to the audit log information that Kosi was showing before, and they don't have access to certain kind of personal information like credit card numbers of customers or payroll information, that kind of stuff. The other major thing to know about them is that their ability to drill down is a little bit limited. In any QuickBooks report, if you're looking at a report and it has a number, you can double click on that number or click on that number and see the transactions that make up that amount. Normally, you can then click on any of those transactions and see the individual transaction, the form, maybe the check or the bill, etc. Report-only users can drill down to the level of the transaction list. They cannot then click on them and see the individual transactions. I'm not sure why, I guess, but that's how it's set up. And that's going to bring us to our last polling question.
Okay, we have come to our last polling question. What accounting software do you currently use? QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, Sage Intacct, another cloud-based software, or another desktop software? Please take a moment now to answer. While participants are recording their answers, I'll provide the third CPE word. The third and final CPE word is candy, C-A-N-D-Y. Again, the third and final CPE word is candy, C-A-N-D-Y.
Thank you, Vanessa. That's great. 47% of people are using QuickBooks Online. That's interesting. As I promised before, I would like to talk about the workaround for the issue I pointed out as one of the limitations for QuickBooks Online. So this issue, just to refresh everyone's memory, is that if you have an issue, you're trying to filter transaction by date of the transaction. In the audit log, you're trying to filter, you're trying to narrow your search down to the transaction by the transaction date. When do you face issue and you might need to run such a report? This is when, I'll give one example. This is when let's say you close September, or let's say you close August, and you send a report to the board members, for instance. And later on, you go in QuickBooks, you run the same report, and you notice the numbers are different. So it will be great if you can just see the transactions that are changed in August. Transactions that have August date that have changed from the time you first run the report and send to the board to now. So it would have been great if Audit Log offers that feature, but unfortunately, it doesn't at the moment. And the workaround is just run a GL. You can filter a GL. You can filter a GL, as you can see on the screen. You can add any of the field there to your report and just filter. This can be a very useful way to solve that problem. And when you run this report, you can see transactions that have changed, and you can just look at those transactions and see what the changes are and fix the issue. The other internal control feature I would like to point out is, just encourage people to look at the bank reconciliation report on a monthly basis. So here, you'll notice in the column when you say changes, on the April line, there's a $716.47. That's a discrepancy. This is a change that was made to cash after the bank reconciliation was done. And in QuickBooks Desktop, you can run a discrepancy report. In QuickBooks Online, you can just look at your reconciliation report and see this problem. And if you click on that $716.47, you see what you're looking at the bottom of the screen, which is a change transaction. So here on May 8th, a payment made to ADP was deleted. And you can then, get to the detail, look at that transaction in more detail, and find out how to restore, fix the issue. So I think this is a great feature that people should use in their closing process, just to make sure nothing has changed after the reconciliation was done. Or if something has changed, just make sure you fix it. Otherwise, your reconciliation won't work. The last piece I would like to talk about is QuickBooks Online gives you the ability to attach documents to entries. So I will give an example of a journal entry. Let's say you write in a journal entry and a controller needs to review that journal entry. I think it will be great if you can just attach the supporting document for that journal entry. And when the reviewer is looking at the journal entry, they can just open up the attachment and see the explanation or the data that supports your entry. I think that's a great feature. And with that said, I think I will turn it to Vanessa for any question the audience might have.
Before we wrap up today, we want to answer a few of the questions submitted by our online participants and any others from the room. So the first question I have, I'll give to you, Ian, and it is, what features do you prefer in QuickBooks Online over desktop?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'm only talking about internal control features here. There are, look back at the agenda, there are some that I like better in online. In particular, the Audit Trail stuff that Kosi showed, I like a lot better in the online version. I think it's easier to use. One important difference is that the audit history, which is that where Kosi clicked on more and then pulled that up. In the online version, you get that for every transaction. In the desktop, you only get it for payables and receivables transactions. I don't know why that's limited in the desktop. I think the bank history that Kosi just showed is a little, bank rec history, sorry, is a little easier to use in QBO. On the other hand, on the desktop, I mentioned that the closing date fixes the void check. So that's definitely better in the desktop version. You can, users and permissions in desktop, you can get a lot more fine-tuned than you can in online. So that's probably better on that side. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ian. And Kosi, I'll send the next question over to you. Do auditors use the audit log?
Thanks, Vanessa. Do auditors use the audit log? I would say it depends. Some might use it, but I would like to point out that I don't think the audit log is designed for auditor use per se, but and also I would say that depend on the access you give to auditors. Ian pointed out one of the options for access is report only user. If you give report only user access to auditors, then they're not going to be able to see the audit log. As I mentioned a couple of times, only users with full access are able to view the audit log. But if you give them full access as an Excel accountant, they might, and depending on the question that they try and answer or things they try and investigate, they might use the audit log.
Great, thank you, Kosi. And
Can I
Ian,
add there?
Oh, sure.
Can I just add that the other option would be to give them external accountant access, but the external accountant can post and edit and change and delete, and auditors probably don't want to be doing that directly in your software.
That's a good point, Ian. And I'll send the next question over to you now. And it is, how can I use QuickBooks Online internal controls to prevent fraud in my organization?
Wow, okay. So I guess that's sort of the million-dollar question. I guess I would say that you can't actually prevent fraud. No system can prevent it. I guess there's the saying that, you can make it a lot more difficult, and to whatever degree you choose to do. But if a fraudster is really, really determined and very clever, then they can, and has lots of friends that are willing to help, then they can figure out a way. But you can make it harder to do, and you can make it easier to detect. So there's various features we talked about that do either of those things. I guess the users and permission access can make it harder to do. The audit trail stuff makes it easier to detect. I guess the main thing that is missing is the ability to have different users with to separate the role of entering a transaction from approving the transaction. That posting and approving. QuickBooks really does not do that. So that's a pretty major deficiency. The way around that is with third-party apps, and Kosi mentioned these, but if you use something like a Bill.com or Tally or Expensify or something, that software, that separate software would have a separate entering and approving roles capacity that would do that stuff, and then these things just feed right back into QuickBooks. So, so you can get around in that way.
Great. Thanks, Ian. Those are some really good points to consider and keep in mind. Kosi, I'll send the next question over to you. I have QuickBooks Online, but I don't see report only user as an option. How can I get access to this?
Thank you, Vanessa. So the user has they're using QuickBooks Online, and they're not able to see the report only user as an option. That's probably the version of QuickBooks Online they're using. That might be the cause, because the report only user option only comes with QuickBooks Online Plus. So if you're using QuickBooks Online Essentials, you don't see report only user as an option. So I would advise the user to check which version of QuickBooks they're using. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kosi. And for the final couple questions, I'm going to pass it over to Ian, and he will take care of those.
Okay, yeah, I see 3 other questions here. First one, is there a way in QuickBooks Online to have a traditional read-only user? The closest to that would be that report-only access, which is pretty much read-only. So I think that's exactly what that would be. What access would you set up an auditor with? So for the read-only, actually going back to the read-only user access, I try to use that a lot with maybe board members or finance committee members. The trick, I guess, is that it is live data. So there has to be a little bit of an education process to make sure they understand that all of the data isn't perfect and up to date to the second every time they log in and look at it, just so they know maybe the status of what months you've closed, or if you go in mid-month, what's up to date and what wouldn't be up to date. Access for an auditor, talked about that a little bit. You can give them the read-only, either report-only access, or you could give them the accountant's access. I think the default, people think they should give them accountants, but external accountant is really meant for somebody that will be posting. And auditors don't post into your system. They don't want to, and you probably don't want them to. So I think I would give them report-only access, and then they just wouldn't be able to drill down as far as maybe they would want to. But if there's a transaction they want to see, you could give them that information, or sort of weigh those two things. Have that limitation, but make them read only. You can make that trade-off. Is it possible to have more than one company open? Yeah, you can definitely, depending on your browser, you can right-click duplicate, but you can have multiple windows. I'm not sure if you can have multiple companies. Kosi, do you know about that? Have you tried multiple companies?
Multiple companies? No, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. You can definitely have multiple windows, so I do that I do that a lot, which kind of gets around one of the major drawbacks of what used to be one of the major drawbacks. But I'd have to check. I kind of think when you log out of one in one window, it's going to log you out in both. But you can play with that pretty easily. Just have multiple windows.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for your questions. Oops. Okay, so with that, GRF would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We encourage you to always check our website for upcoming webinars, seminars, events, and updates at www.grfcpa.com/resources/events. And this slide shows some of our upcoming webinars in the next couple months as well. If you have any additional questions after today's program, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information appears here for both Ian and Kosi. Please remember to complete the emailed survey that follows if you'd like to earn CPE credit for attending today's webinar. Thank you again for attending and have a great day.